Which iPhone is the perfect one for you to buy right now? In this video I will go through a couple different personas, from somebody who travels a lot and therefore needs great battery, to someone who values photography, to another person who just wants to check their emails and make a few calls. For each persona I will pick two iPhones I would recommend. One overall best value pick, as well as one model for people with a tighter budget. And the best part, for each iPhone, besides the buying price, I will also add the yearly cost of ownership, so you really know how much your new iPhone will cost you. So let's get into it. Our first persona is the frequent traveler, somebody who is on the road a lot. That could be actual traveling, but also some kind of outdoor adventures, going somewhere off-grid where, a long-lasting battery is paramount. And before I forget it, I'd also like to explain why I will only pick one value and one budget recommendation. That's because, in my opinion, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to also choose one overall best, because of course the latest and also most expensive iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max is obviously the best in most categories by default, really. So if money doesn't matter at all, just get that one and you can skip the video. But back to our first persona. In this case, I'd go with the iPhone 16 Plus as my value recommendation. According to Apple, its battery life increased again compared to the already excellent iPhone 15 Plus with its 4380 milliamps or something capacity. It now should be Apple's longest lasting phone, just behind the even stronger 16 Pro Max, which of course is also significantly more expensive. As my budget pick, I choose Apple's first iteration of the Plus iPhone, which was the 14 Plus. Why the 14 Plus? Because it is probably the cheapest, relatively modern big battery iPhone you can buy. As you see, for the 14 Plus, I only calculated the yearly cost of ownership for 2 and 3 years instead of 2 and 5 years. And that's really because for this video I set up the rule that you probably don't want to own an iPhone that is much older than 5 years. So 5 years is the max here. If you are interested in the whole concept of cost of ownership for an iPhone, you might want to click on this video here, where I talk in depth about the best, cheapest way to own a modern iPhone. And also keep in mind that all the refurbished prices you see here are based on models in great condition, with at least 90% of max battery capacity as well as warranty. So the prices are a bit higher than what you would find when shopping around Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. And for convenience, I also have the links to every iPhone mentioned here in the description below. Regarding battery life, you can obviously also always just consider a power bank for additional juice in the long day, right? And therefore, when you make it a habit to always carry around one, you could essentially transform any phone into one with great battery life. Next up, we have the photographer. And it is important to think about this persona as somebody who really is into photography, who loves to edit the images, playing around a lot with colors and all that, and really cares. So definitely more than your average selfie or holiday shot, right? If that's true for you, I'd say that the new 16 Pro is probably the way to go with an iPhone 13 Pro as a budget option. Pro iPhones are generally a better choice for everything photo and video related, because they do have bigger sensors than their standard counterparts, as well as additional features like, in the case of photography here, being able to shoot RAW, which is really important if you want to seriously manipulate the colors or exposure and white balance of your shots. Compared to the 16 Pro, the iPhone 13 Pro loses out on the 48 megapixel sensor, but in my opinion, as a working photographer, that it's not that big of a deal. Then obviously on some generational improvements in computational photography, a bit better sensor and this new capture button. While all of that is not really revolutionary and won't really make your images any better, trust me on that, I do think that when looking at cost of ownership, the difference is not really that big. The initial buying price, of course, is. So that's obviously dependent on your financial circumstances a bit here. Now, for video, it is really similar. But this time I went with the max versions, as your phone will chew through your battery like butter when doing video. So bigger is really better here. And a power bank is, in the case of filming, not really convenient, so that's why. Again, the 16 Pro Max is definitely better, and compared to the 13 Pro Max, you essentially gain the ability to shoot log footage, which is a very flat image profile that allows more adjustments in post-processing. But if I have to explain that, you probably are not in the market for a video-centric iPhone anyway. So, right. Also, the 16 Pro is able to shoot 4K up to 120p, paired with an external recorder even in ProRes. Whereas with the 13 Pro Max, you are limited to 4K at 60p and only 4K 30 in ProRes. The 16 also has a more professional microphone, but I wouldn't care about that, as any external microphone you'd use is definitely still better. So yeah. In essence, it is the better slow-mo ability as well as log that you gain with the 16 Pro Max over the 13 Pro Max. Depending on your specific use case, that could be a deal breaker or not. Our next persona here is the gamer. Pretty self-explanatory, right? So what do you need for a great gaming experience on your phone? You, first of all, need a good graphics chip as well as a big battery, because a power bank is definitely not an option economically when gaming, right? That just doesn't work. That leads us to either the Pro Max phones or the Plus phones. But as you don't need the, for example, professional camera features we talked just a few seconds ago, you don't need that for gaming. So my best value pick would be the 16 Plus. Not only has a great battery life, but this year's 16 also came with a huge chip improvement and more or less closed the gap to the Pro models, at least to the 15 Pro. In terms of gaming performance. So that is a no-brainer in my opinion. If you can live with probably a good 50% performance loss, at least in synthetic benchmarks, real-world experience might differ a bit, the 14 Plus might be a good budget option still. Some people might argue here that for gaming, high refresh screens are everything, right? And obviously only the Pro models feature those, but as far as I know, still there are only a very limited number of games which allow something like a 120 FPS mode as of now. So in my opinion, it would be wiser to go with like an iPhone 16 Plus now. And then if you're really into gaming, just replace it after 2 years with a high refresh iPhone. In 2 years, the chips will be even more powerful, and 120 FPS gaming on iOS will probably be the standard. And hopefully by then every iPhone will feature a ProMotion high refresh screen. So now as the next persona, we have people who love small phones. Unfortunately, it seems that you are the minority here, as demand for bigger and bigger phones seems to steadily increase. So you're really limited with choice here, as Apple stopped making small phones after the iPhone 13 mini, which is also my obvious value tip, as it is, as of today, probably the only small iPhone that is good enough for heavier day-to-day use. As a really cheap budget option, there would also be the 3rd gen iPhone SE, but with its subpar battery life, probably only advisable when you're a really light user. Speaking of light users who mostly use their phone for weird things like making actual phone calls, texting a bit here and there, maybe taking the odd photograph from time to time, then the cheap iPhone SE would be an excellent budget choice again. For my value recommendation, I'd go with the iPhone 14. Why the 14 and not like the 13? Because it's even cheaper. Well, I reckon that people who don't care that much about their iPhone also don't care that much about regularly upgrading, selling their phones and so on. And because the price difference between the 13 and the 14 is really small, I think a 1 year more modern phone is a win here. So a good example case would be my mom here, who will get an iPhone 14 for exactly those reasons. But if you really want to use your phone for a long time without the hassle of selling and getting something new every 2 years, you probably should look at the newest phones from Apple, because obviously those will get software updates the longest and will be relevant for many years to come. Especially when you think about Apple Intelligence, their new AI feature, which in the future will be a huge deal for sure in my opinion, but it will only be available on the iPhone 15 Pro as well as the new iPhone 16s. A bit counterintuitively, I put the 15 Pro here as the value option and the 16 as the budget option, even though they are quite similarly priced. But in my opinion, the 15 Pro is overall the better phone with that 120Hz display, better camera, better haptics. But that's just my opinion, obviously, and your mileage may very well vary. Importantly, you have to keep in mind that Apple Intelligence will only roll out in its full form somewhere in 2025. And they're not in every region. I'm from Austria in the European Union, and here it won't come out at all for the foreseeable future due to some regulation issues between Apple and the EU. Same is true for China, for example. So it might make sense to get a slightly older iPhone now and keep it for a shorter time frame before then upgrading to an Apple Intelligence capable iPhone as soon as it is available. And you know, we also have a better feel on how beneficial it actually is, right? Lastly, because a few people asked for it in the comments, I'll also talk about the phone I am personally using. So yeah, it's an iPhone 13, just a standard model. And you know, I'm really happy with it because I don't do any crazy stuff with it, just the normal social media addiction as well as FaceTime, phone calls, text messages, email, browsing the web, and you know, the odd snapshot here and there. I bought it exactly 2 years ago, just after the iPhone 14 came out. And I plan to use it for another year or so before selling and then probably switching to an iPhone 16. And that really is, in my experience, one of the cheapest ways how you can own a modern iPhone. Again, here is my whole in-depth video about all the different buying and selling strategies for a modern iPhone. So that's it for today. I hope you found the video helpful and maybe I could help you with your purchase decision. If so, you know, please consider giving it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more personal finance / decision making / tech videos in the future. Yeah. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.